Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Hey there!
So today we're diving into something pretty interesting in the world of Disney animation. It's about romance, or maybe the lack of it lately.
Right, because, for so many people, Disney is those big, iconic love stories.
Exactly. But it does feel like maybe since Frozen back in 2013, something shifted. Like the main characters maybe aren't getting those central romantic plots anymore.
Yeah, it's a noticeable trend, possibly.
So if you grew up with, Cinderella, Ariel, all of that, you might have picked up on this too. This deep dive is really about trying to understand, why this might be happening. What are the arguments?
And for this, we're focusing on one specific viewpoint. It comes from a transcript from a YouTube channel, MJ Tanner, a dedicated Disney fan's take.
Okay.
So our mission here is to really unpack their argument. Why do they believe Disney seems to have moved away from prioritizing romance? What's their evidence? We're basically going to walk you through their analysis.
Got it. So where do they start?
Well, the YouTuber makes this broader point first, that Hollywood generally seems to be maybe scaling back on romance plots. But yeah, the main focus is definitely Disney. And they point out, look, it's been over 10 years since Frozen.
A whole decade. Wow.
Right. And in that time, we haven't really had a big Disney animated movie where the main character's journey is primarily about finding love.
That's actually true when you think about it.
Now, romance might still be there, as a subplot.
Yeah, like a side thing.
Exactly. But the main story engine seems to be different now. More about leadership or figuring yourself out, achieving goals that aren't tied to a partner.
Which leads to the big question. Is this deliberate?
Yeah.
And if it is, why?
And that's where the YouTuber's hypothesis comes in. It's pretty interesting. They suggest this shift isn't random. It's at least partly a reaction.
Reaction to what?
To criticism. Years and years of criticism aimed at Disney characters, especially the princesses, and how their love stories were handled.
Ah, okay. That makes sense. There has been a lot of discussion about that over the years.
Oh, definitely. The YouTuber brings up some common ones, like the whole damsel in distress thing.
Right. The idea that the princess just waits around to be saved.
Yeah. Or that the princes, the love interests, are kind of one-dimensional, just charming.
Cardboard cutouts almost.
Sometimes, yeah. And the YouTuber feels some of these critiques, especially the more modern one, maybe oversimplify or even misrepresent the older films.
Oh, so...
Well, they mention the Stockholm Syndrome label for Belle in Beauty and the Beast.
Mm-hmm. Heard that one.
Or saying Ariel just, threw her whole life away for a guy.
Yeah, that one's common too.
Or even focusing only on a character's initial flaws, like Aladdin starting as a con man, or the Beast being, beastly at the start without really acknowledging their growth.
Right, ignoring the character arc. That's a fair point, the YouTuber.
And what's also kind of interesting, the YouTuber notes, is how sometimes the villains like Gaston almost get idealized by some critic, like their flaws are overlooked while the heroes are picked apart.
That's a curious observation. So the argument is that Disney heard all this criticism.
And reacted to it. Yeah, the YouTuber believes you can see this reaction pretty clearly in the live-action remakes. It's like Disney's trying to fix the perceived problems of the original.
Okay, so how do these remakes play into it?
Well, the YouTuber sees it as a mixed bag. They give the Cinderella remake from 2015 as maybe a positive example.
How so?
They felt that giving Cinderella and the prince more screen time together, showing them actually connecting, improved that relationship compared to the animated version.
Okay, building a better foundation.
Yeah. But then, they argue, other remakes seem to almost bend over backwards to address criticism, sometimes misinterpreting the original in the process. Trying too hard to be woke, as the YouTuber puts it.
Right. Like what? Any examples?
They bring up the live-action Aladdin, the claim some people made that Jasmine only cared about meeting a guy.
Which seems wrong. I mean, in the original, she was clearly unhappy about being trapped, wanting freedom.
Exactly. That's the YouTuber's point. It felt like a misreading. And then there's the big one from the recent Little Mermaid remake, the Kiss the Girl scene.
Ah, yeah. Controversy there.
The interpretation that Eric was somehow forcing himself on Ariel by almost kissing her.
Which feels like a very modern lens on that scene.
It does. And the YouTuber points out that even the original songwriters seem to kind of go along with that reinterpretation when discussing the changes for the remake.
Wow. So the cultural context really shifts how these things are seen.
Definitely. It shows how what felt romantic or normal decades ago can be viewed very, very differently now.
So bringing it back to the animated films, The YouTuber connects this pressure, this reaction to criticism,
directly to the lack of main character romance in recent original animations. They think Disney's actively avoiding it now.
And Frozen is the big turning point.
That's how the YouTuber sees it. They look at Anna and Hans, that instant connection, the whirlwind engagement.
And then the big twist.
Right. The YouTuber reads that as Disney being kind of meta, almost commenting on the old fairy tale trope of love at first sight, acknowledging the criticism.
Yeah, I could see that. Especially with Elsa's reaction, like, you can't marry a man you just met.
And Kristoff, too. What's his last name? What's his favorite food?
Right. It does feel like they were poking fun at their own history a bit there.
But then, interestingly, the YouTuber does a pivot. They actually mount a defense of some of those classic Disney romances that get criticized.
Oh, which ones?
They focus on 3 that end in marriage: Cinderella, The Little Mermaid, and The Princess and the Frog. And they argue, hey, wait a minute, look at the context within those stories.
Okay, let's break that down. What about Cinderella?
Well, the YouTuber reminds us the whole point of the ball was for Prince Henry to find a wife. Like, royal duty, produce an heir.
Right, the king was insistent.
And his attraction to Cinderella wasn't just looks. The argument is he saw her genuineness, her kindness, which was different. And Cinderella certainly wasn't expecting romance. Plus, the slipper. That was literally his only way to find her again.
True. No social media back then.
And crucially, the marriage was her escape route from an abusive home and fulfilled the king's decree. It served multiple purposes in the plot.
Okay, it makes sense when you lay it out like that. What about The Little Mermaid?
Similar pressures. Prince Eric was also being pushed to marry.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that part.
And the YouTuber stresses the wedding happens months later, after the main drama, and it represents peace between land and sea. It's symbolic. Ursula demanding an immediate marriage. That was shown as weird and wrong within the story.
Good point. The timing matters. And Princess and the Frog?
Prince Naveen, he starts out wanting to marry for money, right? He's flawed.
Totally. A total playboy.
But he goes through major character development. He genuinely falls for Tiana, her drive, her character, and she falls for him. Their wedding in the bayou, which seems fast.
Yeah, it does happen kind of quick.
But it's the act that breaks the curse, because marrying him makes Tiana a princess at that moment. It's plot-driven.
I never quite thought of it that way. So in all 3, the marriage has a specific function beyond just happily ever after.
That's the YouTuber's core argument. These classic endings were more complex, more integrated into the story and character arcs than maybe some critics give them credit for, not just simplistic wish fulfillment.
Okay, so if those romances weren't necessarily shallow, what's the downside of Disney moving away from them, according to this YouTuber?
Well, there's a sense of disappointment expressed, a feeling that it's a shame if Disney feels it has to ditch romance to tell, quote-unquote, deeper stories.
Implying that romance itself isn't deep.
Exactly. The YouTuber pushes back on that, arguing that romance often gets unfairly labeled as shallow. They believe the classic films were deep. They had themes of courage, kindness, resilience, chasing dreams, hard work, alongside the romance.
So it's not an either situation.
That's the view. And they point to Wish, Disney's 100th anniversary film, as maybe a cautionary tale.
Oh, how does Wish fit in?
The YouTuber felt that in Disney's attempt to create a protagonist, Asha, who was free from all the old criticisms, they ended up with someone who felt, well, a bit flat, underdeveloped.
Lacking that spark, maybe?
That seems to be the feeling. The YouTuber didn't hold back on Wish, criticizing the story as kind of bland, the music as forgettable, maybe too many characters. Just generally underwhelming for such a big anniversary film.
Ouch. That's harsh criticism for the 100th.
It is. And here's a really fascinating part. The YouTuber talks about content that was apparently cut from Wish.
Cut content? Like
what's that involved? Romance, or at least more complex relationships. For example, the star character. Originally, it was conceived as a boy, shape-shifting, maybe romantic potential there, reportedly cut because it felt too much like the genie.
Oh, interesting. What else?
There was a song, At All Cost. The demo version apparently had a much more romantic vibe between Asha, Magnifico, maybe. It was changed in the final.
Whoa, really? And get this, Queen Amaya wasn't always just the supportive wife. One early concept had her as an evil partner to King Magnifico, like inspired by Tony and Carmela Soprano.
No way. Like a power couple. Evil power couple.
Apparently. So the YouTuber looks at all these scrapped ideas involving romance or darker complexity.
And thinks removing them hurt the film.
That's the conclusion they draw, that trying so hard to make it safe and avoid criticism might have made Wish feel more generic, less engaging than it could have been.
And how did fans react to hearing about this cut content?
According to the YouTuber, very enthusiastically, people started creating fan art, fan fiction, reimagining Wish with these elements put back in, more romance, more complex fill-ins.
So there's an audience desire for that kind of storytelling.
It certainly suggests that. It points to maybe a disconnect between where Disney is currently heading and what a segment of the fan base is actually hoping for.
So the YouTuber wraps up with a clear hope. They want Disney to perhaps be anti-love, as they put, to find that match, maybe by not being quite so afraid of romance.
To the point where they're more excited about fan creation.
Yeah, they actually say that they find themselves more excited by fan project based on Disney properties than the official stuff sometimes, which is quite a statement.
It really is. Okay, so let's try and sum up this deep dive. We explored this YouTuber's perspective.
Right. The core argument being Disney seems to have backed away from main character romance and animation since Frozen.
And the YouTuber believes this is largely because of criticism, maybe overblown criticism, in their view of the classic Disney romances.
Yeah, and they argue those older romances actually had more depth and narrative purpose than they often get credit for. Romance doesn't automatically mean shallow.
And the potential negative outcome of this shift, highlighted by the YouTuber, is films like Wish, which they felt suffered from trying too hard to avoid those past tropes, losing something vital in the process.
Exactly, a loss of complexity, maybe even magic.
So it leaves a really interesting question for you, the listener. Thinking about what we've discussed, this YouTuber's perspective, do you think Disney has shifted away from romance?
And if you do, is that a good thing? A bad thing? Maybe somewhere in between?
Yeah, maybe think about your own favorite Disney movies.
Yeah.
What role did romance play in them? Did it add something, or could they have worked just as well without it? Something to chew on.
Definitely food for thought.
Well, thanks for taking this deep dive with us today.